From Studio A and beautiful West Michigan and proven winners Color Choice Shrubs, it's the Gardening Simplified Show with Stacy Hervella, me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. Well, today, Stacy, we're going to give a sprout out to all those who attempt to grow fresh produce in their homes. I mean, in early August, we did a show on Garden-topia, so why don't we do a show on Sprout-topia? Our show is made with homegrown ingredients, no sugar, no fat, no cholesterol, and proven to promote clean air and good health. Can you tell my doctor's been talking? Is it practical to grow vegetables indoors? Maybe some leafy greens and some herbs. Remember, there are people who believe that it's not practical to grow vegetables outdoors. Remember reading the book, The $64 Tomato?
Oh, yes, that made quite the stir. But you know what? I take a huge objection to that. Now, as I've maybe mentioned on the show before, I am a knitter. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, as any knitter can attest, you do not knit because you are saving money. You knit and you pay for hobby time, and then you get something great at the end. And that's the same with the tomatoes. You know? You're not like, oh, I'm going to save so much money. Like, how many tomatoes are you buying that you think that growing your own tomatoes is going to be a money-saving endeavor? It is not. It is a hobby, a vocation, a calling, an experiment.
However, there is, a tomato that comes out of your backyard tastes so good. I wouldn't say so with an indoor tomato, but a tomato that comes out of your backyard, wow, does that taste good.
Right. I mean, it really does. And there is certainly some mental aspect to that where you are, pre-programmed to like it since you worked so hard growing it. But on the other hand, the biggest advantage you have growing your own produce is that you eliminate the need to transport it. And increasingly in the U.S., produce has declined in quality because the riper it is, the softer it is, so it doesn't make that trip very well from wherever it was grown to you. Even that includes farmers markets, really, because, big old truck on bumpy country roads. And people have absolutely zero tolerance for, quote, imperfect produce.
And today, a lot of talk about these giga farms that are indoor growing facilities, growing vegetables that they build and go vertical and put them near heavily populated areas. It's fascinating. When I hear giga farms, I think of gigawatts and Dr. Brown, was it, and Marty with Back to the Future. But anyhow, yeah, it's real futuristic, I guess. And so growing in plants indoors or growing vegetables indoors, obviously you need reliable light, air temperature, space for both roots and top growth, drainage, air movement, nutrient source, maintenance, probably some bugs thrown in. So how about a little easier solution? Sprout it from the rooftops. Sprouts.
I am a big believer in sprouts, and I have to say, I am surprised. I've been sprouting for a long time, not consistently, but, I started doing it a long time ago. And because I just really liked sprouts. And of course, there have been all through time, different food recalls concerning sprouts, a lot of surface area there. They're very delicate. And, I have to say, I am shocked in this day and age of all sorts of gadgets and Instagram and people glamorizing all of this, plant lifestyle, that sprouts to this day still have not really caught on in the way that they should.
That's true. And I agree with you because they're fun to grow. They're nutritious. They're easy.
They're so easy.
There was a time when I got into kombucha and I got myself a SCOBY and I gave up on it because it was so much work. Okay. But sprouts are relatively easy.
Yes. Sprouts are, compared to kombucha, sprouts are much easier.
Yes.
And, I was once in a little bit of a kombucha phase. And when it came time, and, as our listeners know, I am not really squeamish. Like, bugs don't freak me out. The time came that I had to separate out the kombucha mother. Oh man, I about lost it. It was horrendous. I couldn't, after that, I couldn't do it. But sprouts aren't gross at all. And, I think, again, going back to like all of these gadgets and things that are marketed to us on Instagram as ways to grow vegetables indoors, I think we have to kind of think critically about like, you wouldn't want to live in one of those giga farms.
Right.
It would be, you'd be living under weird LED pink lights which might be fun for a brief period, but not long term. Really, cold because you need really good air circulation. A farm is not an indoor farm, is not a place to live. And your place to live is not really an indoor farm. So I think, I never want to discourage people from trying anything when it comes to plants and gardening. Like, by all means, try it. But I think very often, as is the case with many things these days, expectations are not always realistic about what you can do indoors. Whereas with sprouts, what you see is what you get.
That's very true. And Stacy, as far as sprouts are concerned too, you don't have to worry that much about light. Mm-hmm. We'll figure that out today as we have an interview in segment 4 with the sprout people.
The sprout people.
But I do want to mention, and I had a conversation, we had him on our show a few weeks ago, Noah Deer-Ohanian, and he said that in the winter months, you've got to get the light right. Especially if you're going to try and grow some leafy vegetables. So today there are units and all kinds of kits that you can buy to grow indoor leafy vegetables. But the key component is the availability of indoor lighting today is unreal compared to what we used to have. And the LED lights are unreal. Noah would say to me, get something that's full spectrum. And if you're going to look online for something like that, you want a CRI, which is a color rendering index of at least 90 or better. And then as far as trying to replicate natural light, you're looking for something in that 5,000 to 6,500 K range. So those are the key things to look for if you're going to go online. But Stacy, if you're out there shopping for LED grow lights today, it's unbelievable what's available.
And you know what else is unbelievable about them is the price. They are so affordable. And I think you and I can certainly attest to a time where you would have to be so serious about indoor growing to invest in lights. And now it's just like, it's nothing. They run cooler. They're not expensive to run. But, lighting is obviously crucial. You cannot grow most food, aside from sprouts, indoors without light. But, light is not the only thing. It's also the air circulation. It's also the warmth. And it just goes back to these conditions that we don't want to live in, and neither do the vegetables. Yeah. So what's going to give?
Right. I don't want to live under a shop light that I bought from the hardware store, and that's how I used to do it, with the fluorescent bulbs in it. But today, as far as sprouts are concerned, and you look at the list, and we'll talk about it in segment 4, brassica sprouts like broccoli and cabbage, grain sprouts, arugula. There's even, of course, doggy sprouts. Adriana was talking to us about that.
Yeah. Amazing. She got them, and she got the 4 legs of love mix from Sprout People and gave it to her dog. So please be sure to check it out on YouTube and see the dogs enjoying the sprouts. So sprouts are also not just for people.
I always had a cat in the house and grew wheatgrass. I have a lot of friends, a number of friends who are into lawn care. And they go through withdrawal in the winter. So they grow some wheatgrass, have a scissors on their desk. They groom the lawn now and then. It makes them feel... Yeah.
The lawn people do that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's fun because you go through withdrawal. Actually, for me, and I brought this along. I'm going to share it with you and Adriana. I brought this along, but this is my juice. It is made from wheatgrass, alfalfa grass, and beets. I brought along shot glasses if you want to try it for those watching on YouTube.
All right.
But wheatgrass is so much fun to grow. Obviously, people love to grow mung bean sprouts, arguably the most popular. And then, of course, pea shoots. Now, pea shoots are really cool to grow because you can grow them in coconut coir and have fun growing something in the dead of winter that's nutritious.
I think it really is just that people need to kind of, if you want to grow food indoors, I think it's important to start shifting your mentality from, I'm going to grow tomatoes and basil and rosemary, to I'm going to grow sprouts and microgreens and wheatgrass and things that have a short life cycle, because all of these things are ready very quickly.
Yes.
And they don't need special equipment. They're not going to disrupt your life or your bank account. Very easy to kind of just work into your regular life. Yeah. And even if you don't eat them, that, as a gardener, I think that process of watching things grow, like your lawn buddies with their wheatgrass. It's so refreshing. It really, truly does help you get through the depths of winter, which we are most certainly in at this very moment.
And the sprouts are delicious because full transparency here, that wheatgrass and alfalfa grass juice, I hate it. It tastes awful. It tastes terrible. But it lowers cholesterol. It's supposed to be good for an old guy like me, so I drink it. But I'd rather eat sprouts. So we're going to talk about it in segment 4 today with Gil and Lori, the sprout people. Coming up next, Stacy will talk to us about plants on trial. We'll see what she has on her mind today. That's next here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. We are talking about sprouts and growing things indoors to get you through the winter, things that you can eat. And Rick, I couldn't help but notice a tiny bit of resentment in your voice talking about how the wheatgrass and alfalfa grass stuff that you drink tastes horrible.
It's awful. But let me quickly mention, Stacy, Gil and Lori, who we'll talk to in segment 4, they have a wheatgrass smoothie that allegedly tastes much better than what I'm doing.
Well, see, this is what I'm on to is, we often say on the show, golden age of plant breeding.
Yep.
So maybe there is a plant breeder out there who can work on, making those things just as nutritious and just as healthful. Maybe doing something about the flavor. I don't know. Maybe it's possible. Maybe it's not.
Wheatgrass that tastes like pecan pie?
Yeah, there you go. Okay. You never know.
I'm in.
You never know. Far be it from me to claim what might be possible for the numerous talented plant breeders out there.
You're just planting a seed.
There you go. That's exactly it. And maybe it'll sprout. So anyway, I always try to tie, of course, the plants on trial into the theme of the show. And it was not easy today. I would say it was nigh on impossible. Now, we do have in the Proven Winners Color Choice line some plants that have edible fruit. Some of them are so new that they're not even really out on the market yet and won't be until 2026. So I obviously can't talk about those and get you all excited about something you can't grow yet. And most of the other things that we have that have some sort of edible component, I've already talked about, and so it kind of left me with few options. So I turned to the plant names. And that is how I settled on today's plant on trial, soft serve false cypress.
Oh, I love it. I scream, you scream. We all scream for ice cream.
And it may be the middle of winter, and that might be a good excuse for you to not eat your veggies. Nothing growing. Didn't go to the store. All you have is ice cream. Soft serve false cypress gets the first part of its name, the soft serve part, because it is a beautiful structural conical shaped evergreen. Mm-hmm. So almost like, the proverbial soft serve ice cream cone where they, do the swirly bits there.
My grandson loves it.
Who doesn't, So it has a little bit of that. Of course, it is green and not striped white and brown, chocolate and vanilla. So that's where that part of the name came from. But as I was writing all of this up and thinking about it, I realized that the name false cypress has a whole lot of confusion with it.
Yeah, it does.
There are a lot of plants out there.
Good point.
Called cypress, or that somehow have cypress in their name. And I think especially for those of us who live in a cold climate, we're a little bit unsure of just precisely what a cypress is. Now, if you've been to Italy, you have seen the archetypical cypress, those beautiful, narrow, tall evergreens that just dot the landscape throughout the Mediterranean. That is a cypress, Cupressus sempervirens, also known as Italian cypress, and false cypress, Chamaecyparis, so not Cupressus, is in the cypress family, but it's not a cypress. And you want to hear how it gets even more confusing?
Oh, lay it on me.
So the name false cypress, so the name Chamaecyparis does not translate to false cypress. It actually translates to dwarf cypress.
Oh, my.
And it's not dwarf.
No, they're not.
It's not dwarf. I mean, maybe compared to like a really mature Italian cypress, which could easily probably get to be near 50 feet tall. Chamaecyparis piscifera, which is the species of today's plant on trial, soft serve false cypress, probably tops out around 15 feet, which I would not say really quite counts as dwarf.
No.
So I think Linnaeus got that a little bit wrong as he was doling out botanical names back in the day. The Piscifera part of the name, so Chamaecyparis piscifera here is the scientific name of soft serve Chamaecyparis, false cypress, translates to the Latin for pea-bearing.
Oh, this is getting more confusing as we go.
Right? And it's, so if you look up a picture of the fruits of Chamaecyparis piscifera, I mean, I guess they're a little bit pea-like. Yeah. They're round. They're green when they're fresh. They end up turning brown as a pea would as well. They don't come in a pod. They just look like a little green, kind of like a little round ball of, it reminds me of shields, like the shape of a shield kind of multiplied over a sphere, but tiny, like about the size of a pea. Yeah. So Chamaecyparis piscifera, soft serve. What's in a name? I guess when I started thinking about today's Plant on Trial, it's based on the name. Of course, I had to go deep into the name and the etymology there. So there we are. So as you know already, and you can see on the YouTube version or in the show notes at gardeningsimplifiedinair.com, this is a conical evergreen. Looks like one of those. And one of the reasons that we introduced it was as an alternative for dwarf Alberta spruce. How do you feel about dwarf Alberta spruce?
Well, I was just going to say that we, in one show, talked about touchable plants. And for me, Chamaecyparis is one of those touchable plants compared to a dwarf Alberta spruce. Now, I like dwarf Alberta spruce.
Oh, you do?
But they're kind of ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous is one way to put it. Yes. I mean, I do feel like this is a plant that kind of is like the blue spruce was in the 70s and 80s, where everybody and their brother planted it.
You're right.
I would say dwarf Alberta sort of had its day maybe in the late 80s through
90s.
Yeah, 80s, very 90s plant. And the 90s are in right now. Please don't bring back the dwarf Alberta spruce with all of those crazy sweaters.
Remember, Stacy, I come from the garden center industry.
I know. That's the other thing about dwarf Alberta spruce, right? People go to the garden center and they see this cute little like 1 or 2 gallon dwarf Alberta spruce, and they're like, I love that.
It's cute.
It's small. It's tidy. I like that shape. And then they bring it home and they plant it, not looking at the tag, and they say, okay, well, it says it's going to be, up to 13 or 15 feet tall. Yeah, right. I don't think this little cute thing is going to turn out to be 15 feet tall and 10 feet wide. Time goes by. And next thing you know, you got this giant dwarf Alberta spruce that's like eating your house. Right?
Yeah, it's true.
And dwarf Alberta spruce also have another substantial liability, and that is because of that very, very dense branching, they are quite susceptible to spider mites.
Spider mite city. Yeah, I wash mine out with a hose constantly in summer.
So that works. That's one way. But I don't think most people will wash their dwarf Alberta spruces.
Understand.
That's just another thing that makes your neighbors wonder about you.
Makes me unique.
But they are naturally susceptible to spider mites. So add in the fact that people tend to plant these around their front door, so near the house where they're not getting super great air circulation. They tend to not always space them properly because they don't believe, as they can't be blamed, don't believe it's going to get to be such epic proportions. And they also revert. And you've seen this. I know we've talked about it on the show before. So dwarf Alberta spruce is what is known as like a witch's broom or a sport off of a white spruce. Now, a white spruce is like a full-size spruce tree, big old spruce tree, 60 feet or more tall, and certainly very, very wide. And this is just a little mutation that someone picked up on and is propagated and sent all over North America and the world. But they seem to be especially susceptible to reverting back to that full tree form. Mm-hmm. So you have your cute little dense dwarf Alberta spruce, and then all of a sudden, white spruce just busting out of it like the Hulk.
It's the perfect thing to sell at Christmas time. Put a little red bow, some ornaments on it.
It's true.
We sold millions of them.
If you do have a dwarf Alberta spruce that reverted, that's what you should do, is wait until Christmas to prune out the reversion. Just prune that out, and then you got your Christmas tree right there. If you have a dwarf Alberta spruce that has a big old tree coming out of it, that is not a seedling that fell through the middle, that is literally the plant reverting back to its old self. So you want to cut that out as soon as possible, or if not, at Christmas, so you have your own Christmas chemistry. So suffice it to say, dwarf Alberta spruce has a lot of liabilities, but people love that conical shape. They love the dense branching. And that's where soft serve comes in, is it provides that same nice, beautiful, dense shape. It has really lovely fern-like branching.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, if you look at a single branch, it does quite look like a fern. Sort of bluish undersides with a white stripe that's kind of interesting. A nice resiny, piney kind of smell. People do get them confused often with arborvitae and don't understand the difference between chamaecyparis and arborvitae. But one of the things, of course, is that arborvitae smells deliciously fruity, whereas chamaecyparis smell very kind of resinous. And you can also tell because if the plant has been decimated by deer, it's an arborvitae. And if it hasn't been touched, it's a false cypress. Because they are a great alternative for people who want the look of an arborvitae but have deer. They aren't quite as shade tolerant as an arborvitae, but they do have similar cold and heat tolerance and are pretty much just as easy to grow.
Yeah. I think they're perfect for the home landscape.
Yeah, they really are. And it's just a refreshing change from all those dwarf Alberta spruces. So if you are in the market for a beautiful, tight, conical evergreen with that great structure and year-round beauty, looks great with Christmas lights on it, soft serve chamaecyparis. Learn more about it at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com and be sure to ask for it at your local garden center this spring when shopping season begins. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're opening up the garden mailbag, so please stay tuned. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. It's time for us to answer your gardening questions, celebrate your gardening successes, or just, commiserate. Because
hang out.
Yeah, if you don't have other gardeners in your life who you can commiserate with, that can be kind of a sad thing.
Yeah,
so
it's nice to hang around gardeners. They're nice people.
And gardeners truly are nice people, and they tend to be very generous with their knowledge.
That's
there's certainly other things where people are very secretive. They don't want to share their discoveries and they guard it all up. And gardeners are, and I think traditionally have always been, very generous. If you have a gardener in your life, you're probably not leaving your house. You're probably not leaving their house without a plant.
That's true.
And if you are, it's because they've already tried and you've declined.
As gardeners, we'll dole out advice whether you want it or not. Right?
That's true, too. As we can attest. But a listener, Sandy, wrote us with some great suggestion. She is using a dead red cedar, which is Juniperus virginiana, popular landscape plant, especially in the Northeast and Southeast. And she had one that died. And she sends pictures of it. She covered it with a single round of chicken wire. Okay. And is using it to grow up a honeysuckle vine.
I love that.
I love that too. And the great thing is that, yes, the honeysuckle vine will absolutely be able to find its way. It's not a huge tree, much like my maple tree that was the subject of some questions a few weeks ago. So not a huge tree, but the that chicken wire really helps to provide more surface area for it to find its way up. So she sent a picture of the chicken wire around the dead tree trunk in the winter, as well as one when the honeysuckle is in flower. So you can see that as the plant starts to leaf out in winter, that chicken wire is very apparent, but you're not looking out the window anyway, hopefully. But then by the time summer rolls around, it just completely covers that. And she just has this beautiful flowering giant mushroom looking thing in her yard.
And Sandy can go beyond that. We've had Jan Johnson on our show, the Gardentopia show, and she did a great article on stumperies or something called a stumpery. So, if we celebrate dead and dying foliage in the fall, why not celebrate dead stumps and use them for something?
Yeah, and they're great for birds too.
Yeah.
Woodpeckers love them.
Yeah.
So if you can safely leave a dead tree in your yard, there's so many benefits. And if your neighbors are like, why is my crazy neighbor not taking down the dead tree in their yard? You just cover it with a vine and all is well.
I love it.
That is my strategy anyway. So what do we got in the mailbag?
Patrizia, I think I got that name right.
I'd say probably Patrizia.
Patrizia?
Yeah, Patrizia.
Okay. Writing to us from Italy, watching from Italy, 35 kilometers north of Venice, USDA zone equivalent 8. Writes to us, says, loves the show. I have a small urban garden this autumn. Had a 9-meter Chanticleer.
Yeah.
Calorie pear removed as it had outgrown the space and suffered from sooty mold, covered everything from the terraces, blinds, all plants underneath, trying to be organic. Is going to plant a crepe myrtle, locally grown. How can I help the nutrient plants I'll be putting back into my blue border thrive as the soil is trampled, super washed out by heavy rain, bare now in winter, even weeds have stopped growing?
Yeah, and she also goes on to say, if you have time, how to help my Osakazuki Japanese maple suffering from iron deficiency.
I think that is one of the best fall color Japanese maples.
It is a beautiful one, and she sends a picture, so you can check that out on the YouTube version or in the show notes at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. So, 2 questions here. Number 1, how to deal with the bad soil where she had the Bradford pear. So Chanticleer, I always say Bradford pear. Bradford is actually a specific variety of calorie pear, but it kind of stands in like, Kleenex or Band-Aids. So she specified a specific variety of it, but it's basically a Bradford pear. So that got removed, kind of destroyed the soil. She had a heavy rainfall. So how does she restore that soil? So the truth is when you need to improve any soil, the number 1 thing you got to do is get organic matter back in there. And organic matter is going to make the conditions more favorable for plant growth. It's going to improve the texture and structure of the soil. But it's not always practical, especially if there are already some plants there to, go and till in or dig in a whole bunch of organic matter. So to me, the key here really is compost and or mulch. And you can put, a thin-ish layer, say 2 to 3 inches, 5 to 7 centimeters of compost over that without really tilling it in. If your soil's not super heavy clay, you can just kind of rake it in. But I think mulch really for Patrizia is going to be the key to starting to revitalize this area. And I think you can still plant the crepe myrtle that you're thinking about planting. And then just cover that area with mulch and let the mulch do its thing. Let it sit, let it start to decompose, let those microorganisms start to work. Keep that mulch topped up over the next couple of years. And I think that will not only help to build up organic matter, but it prevents further soil loss and erosion and other nutrient loss.
Yeah, here. If you, that's the great thing about organic matter, is if you want to add that to the soil, it works if the soil is well drained or too drained, and it also works in clay soil.
Yep.
So it works both ways.
It works in sandy soil too. Yeah. When your soils are so sandy that they don't hold much water. Now, when we say organic matter, what we really just mean is a soil amendment made from something that was living. So this could be composted manure. Of course, composts are made of, decomposed vegetables and vegetation and all of that. So we're looking, and bark is
leaf compost.
Leaf compost is another one. So just something that was made from something that was once living or from a living organism, that is organic matter. And that's what really works those wonders for troubled soils to, again, revitalize the structure, revitalize the nutrition. And yeah, mulching is one really easy way to do that. Now, as for the iron deficiency on the maple, maples in general are fairly susceptible to iron deficiency, but the key here is you don't want to just keep putting a Band-Aid on a problem. You need to discover what is the cause of the iron deficiency in the maple. And some common causes for that are soil pH, high soil pH. So basically a more alkaline soil above like 7.5, that will bind any iron that's in the soil and prevent the plant from taking it up. So you need to know what your soil pH is. If you say put iron chelate, as she mentions that she's done for her hydrangeas, but doesn't seem to be helping the maple, again, you're not changing the problem. You'll just have to continue doing that. So you would then want to instead put something on your soil to lower that pH into a more favorable, level. High calcium. Calcium will also tie up nutrients in the soil. So you could naturally have high calcium if you have limestone soil, and that will also tie up iron. High salt content. I have to say, I don't know anything about the soils in Italy at all, much less 35 kilometers north of Venice. So I don't know exactly what you're dealing with. And she does mention in talking about the removed pear tree, heavy rain and excessive leaching from heavy rains or excessive watering can also take out the iron. So I would recommend, Patricia, that you figure out what is the cause of the iron deficiency and then you can work on resolving it. So you're not just, putting down chemicals every single year and getting, low to mediocre results.
Yeah, I have an arborist friend who taught me years ago when he would approach a tree trying to diagnose a problem, he always said, look down, not up.
Yep.
Our tendency is to look up in trees, but look down. Is the soil compacted? Is it a heavy clay soil? Possibly the roots are girdling. There are a host of different roads you could go down with this problem.
So you have to be a little bit of a detective, but that'll get you started. And I will post some iron amendment links on the show notes for you.
Neil writes to us this week, my area, southeastern Ohio, has had about 6 to 8 inches of accumulated snow. I feel your pain. Over the past few days, both Stacy and I have had somewhere in the area of about 20 inches?
I'd say we've got about 2 feet. Yeah. Probably last week.
Wow. So a lot of time to be inside and be bored, says Neil. A rumor has been spreading that is this a good time to throw out some wildflower seed? Being bored, and I thought, well, what can it hurt? So I went out to the shed, found some wildflower seed, and threw it out in a flower bed that was full of snow. Am I going to have wildflowers, or should I have found something else to cure my boredom? Well, this is certainly something you can do. And one thing I would suggest is getting online, Neil, and looking at all these people who are taking milk containers, 1 gallon jugs, cutting them and then retaping them with duct tape and putting seeds in there and sowing seeds from yarrow to calendula to poppies, parsley, whatever it may be. Fun thing to do. So, no. I think that freeze-thaw cycle of stratification for a lot of seeds, we can take advantage of it in the winter.
Yeah, especially wildflowers or native plants. So what Rick is talking about is a process called winter sown, S-O-W-N. And gardeners basically take milk jugs, cut them in half, like you said, label them. You got to make sure you know what's in there. And then it's a great way to start all sorts of things, certainly native perennials, but people use them for annuals, for cold, hardy vegetables like kale and lettuce and onions. And there's just tons and tons of resources online. So, Neil, the bottom line is what you did could result in wildflowers, but you have to also consider we still have many more weeks of winter here in the Midwest. Birds are hungry, squirrels are hungry, possum, raccoon are all hungry, and they just found that wildflower seed that you put out there.
Chipmunks.
So it's been put to good use, but the fact is if you want to keep your wildflower seed, probably storing it away in one of these milk jugs would be a safer way to make sure it makes it all the way to spring. So we will put some resources for this process of winter sowing in the show notes. We're going to take a little break before we come back with Lori and Gil from Sprout People and learn all about sprouting. So please stay tuned. Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. We have a very special treat for you. We've been talking about things that you can grow indoors in the winter and have a little bit of a refreshing break from all of the cold and gloom and actually hopefully get something to eat. And, one thing that we've said repeatedly is that, sprouts like alfalfa sprouts, bean sprouts, all of these things deserve to have their day. And we're really surprised that after all of this time and Instagram and TikTok and all of these opportunities for people to learn about them, that it does not seem like they've really taken off. Well, they've taken off in the Gardening Simplified Show because Adriana and I have been growing them and having a great time. And we ordered our sprouts from a company called sproutpeople.org. So we thought that one of the owners, Gil Frischman, would be a great guest to help our listeners learn more about sprouts, sprouting, and microgreens. So welcome to the show, Gil.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Now, you guys own sproutpeople.org, which not only has one of the best selections of sprouts and sprouting supplies and microgreens, seeds and microgreen supplies, but an incredible treasure trove of resources and information on sprouting. I was really impressed. There was nothing that I felt was lacking when I was sort of educating myself on it. So I think a lot of people sort of going to start with a basic question, like what is the difference between sprouts and microgreens?
That's an excellent question, and it's a pretty simple answer. A sprout is something is a seed that we grow solely with water. And really, a sprout is nothing but a germinated seed. It can be grown to different lengths, but once the seed has soaked up its fill of water, it is alive. And therefore, it goes through its greatest nutritional gain just by soaking up its fill of water. And we finished sprouts in a matter of days solely with water, rinsing and draining, and greening in the case of sprouts like alfalfa. We'll expose them to light so that they can perform the magic of photosynthesis. A microgreen is a seed that you plant on a medium of some sort, whether it be soil-like or soil-less, and it grows roots into that medium, and it is harvested anywhere from several days to a few weeks, in some cases later, by cutting above that medium. When you cut them above that medium, they're no longer alive, but they're still packed with nutrition. So that's the difference with sprouts are solely water. Microgreens are grown on a medium and harvested by cutting above the medium.
So, Gil, I'm interested in growing pea shoots using coconut coir. If I do that, I'm essentially growing a microgreen, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
You are, Rick. And a good choice. And a very easy place to start. And I think always wise to start easy, because I mean, the greatest thing about this is just grow some food for yourself. Yeah. Grow plants. I mean, if you don't want to grow food, grow flowers. Growing things, it's good for your soul.
You're preaching to the choir, Gil.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, really. Who's listening that isn't already aware of that?
So my question then is that how do they compare in terms of space? Because, a lot of us have smaller kitchens. Some of us have huge kitchens. But like how much space do you need to grow microgreens versus growing sprouts?
Not a fascinating question, Stacy. In the case of sprouts, they tend to take up less space because, well, depending on what you grow them in, they can be stacked or just squeezed together. I mean, we have a preference for certain sprouters, but in the case of microgreens, you always need horizontal space for them to grow. So, however much you want to grow, that's not to say sprouts can't mimic this. I mean, if you want to grow a bunch of alfalfa or a bunch of what we refer to as leafy sprouts, which are either clover or alfalfa and things mixed into those all require or prefer photosynthesis as the last part of what they do. So they end up spreading out too and all need access to light. There's no stacking at that point. But I've always felt that sprouts are much more space efficient myself. It's just the crop is done sooner too. So I have a small kitchen and I have pictures, and I've done some of our videos will show I'll have a dozen or more sprouters sometimes, and boy, it impacts my cooking. There's just not enough room in the kitchen to have so much stuff out, but I find that sprouts take up less space.
Now, what about time?
Definitely. I mean, if you're growing, the high end for sprouts is like 6 days. Alfalfa sprouts and clover sprouts, those are 6-day crops in my book. And microgreens, the only seeds that will harvest that soon, closer to 7 or 8 days, are some small seeds like arugula, broccoli. Broccoli as a sprout finishes in 5 days. As a microgreen, it takes about 7 or 8, possibly 10. Besides the actual climate we're in, there's also just the time of year. I had a friend when we were in the business of growing sprouts, before we just went into selling seeds, when we were growing sprouts in the Midwest and distributing around Wisconsin mostly, but also up into Minnesota and down into Illinois and Iowa. I had a friend who grew at a much bigger facility than us in Chicago, and she always said, I just don't understand why the wheatgrass takes a day longer in the winter. Why? Everything's the same. I'm inside. It's, how do the seeds know it's winter? And we always just said they're just smarter than us. They know something we don't know. So there are some variations. So like I said, the leafy sprouts are a 6-day crop in my book. In the summer, you can end up with them in 5 days, but they'll seldom go longer, but definitely longer in the winter.
I actually found something very similar. So I got my sprouts from you guys, or my seeds in Sprouter, at the beginning of January. And last week we had very, very cold conditions. And I would say that that batch of sprouts that I was trying to grow last week took longer than the ones that I'd had. Of course we had our heat at the same level, but just, the cold coming in from the windows and everything else just made it slower. I think one of the best reasons to grow sprouts, of course, is that, again, it's something that you can successfully grow that I think is delicious and very easy to grow, very low maintenance, works well, even if you have a full-time job and a busy life. But the fact is, they are also extremely nutritious. Can you tell us more about sort of the nutritional and health benefits?
Sprouts are the most nutrient-dense food that exists, as far as I know, because they're a living food. And even if you grow them, so you grow a crop of sprouts, bean sprouts take just 2 to 3 days, the leafy sprouts, 6 days. When you harvest them and put them in the refrigerator, they don't stop growing. Their growing just goes way down. And so when you eat them, they're still alive. And like I mentioned earlier, the soaking of the seed is the greatest nutritional gain that happens. Over the course of sprouting, additional vitamins and nutrients can increase, but there's no gain like just soaking them. So when you eat them, you're getting the full potential of a plant. I think that broccoli, which it was September of 1997 that broccoli sprouts became famous when the doctors from Johns Hopkins released their study about the antioxidant sulforaphane content in broccoli sprouts being up to 50 times that of mature broccoli.
Wow.
And and I in my non-educated way, because Lori and I went to art school. We've never studied growing. We just loved to grow food. We gardened. And so everything is just a learning experience for us, or everything has come through learning. But since you're eating the seed, the only part of the seed you're not eating after you've grown a sprout is the hull. If the hull's gone, and the hull has no great benefit one way or the other. If you can eat it, you don't have to. We get rid of them because they can lessen the shelf life of the finished crop. But you've got the full potential of the plant. That's what you're eating. So it's not any surprise to me that they're so much more powerful. I mean, we eat a lot of vegetables too. We don't just eat sprouts. We garden obsessively. So, but as far as nutrient density, it's just, there's nothing like sprouts, because I really, again, uneducated, it's just the full potential of the plant you're consuming. If you take any one of those seeds that you germinated and you put it in a garden and you see what it grows into, just imagine that you're getting all of that, just in this tiny little package, because that's what it is. But I will say I have taken, we've been asked about nutrients forever. And I've always told people, really, I'm just a grower. I have a terrible tendency. I'm much older, so this line actually is kind of out of date now. But for years, I just told people, if I was not constrained by thinking or anything, I'd probably just be eating cheeseburgers all the time and ice cream. And I know sprouts are way better than that, because I can feel it when I eat them.
If you're keeping score at home, we're chatting with Gil Frischman, and the website, if you want to check it out, as Stacy mentioned at the outset, so much great information there. Also watch some of the YouTube videos. It's sproutpeople.org. Sproutpeople.org. I had a lot of fun watching YouTube videos also, but the information there on the website, Stacy, are great. And as long as we're on the topic of nutrition, Gil, I shared with Adriana and Stacy my wheatgrass and alfalfa grass juice that I make and I drink. It tastes terrible. And so I am very excited about the wheatgrass smoothie recipe I saw on your website. But I wanted to give you a plug there for folks listening, of course, on podcasts and radio, as well as YouTube, sproutpeople.org. Gil, I would suspect that sprouts are very, very popular and going to continue to become more and more popular. I remember Y2K and the impact, and then, of course, being in the garden center industry, the impact of the COVID pandemic. You've probably seen a lot of interest in seed growing and growing of sprouts, especially in the last couple of years, right?
Rick, it's true. Those two things highlight the two biggest points. Actually, 1997 with the issuance of the Johns Hopkins report on broccoli really was the first thing in our experience that elevated sprouts to the greater consciousness. And it's a shame that, I mean, they were kind of discovered by Ann Wigmore in the 60s, 70s. And there was a group of people who grew sprouts. And of course, during the hippie days, people they appreciated them. It's just that communication was so different back then that selling anything, was a completely different experience. But both Y2K and COVID created an incredible demand for sprouting because people wanted to grow indoor different things, right? Y2K was just because fear of the end of everything. And but yeah, I would say that those things have unfortunately not sustained. I mean, there are people that got in because of those things that have stayed long term. We see our repeat customers that have been around, some of them with us for over 2 decades, and some that's just started in 2020 and have been avid since. The
whole point, Gil, here is that not only easy to grow, but nutritious for us as people. But Stacy, you and Adriana brought to my attention that there are, pets too that really dig sprouts.
Yeah, so Adriana bought the 4 Legs of Love mix from Sprout People for her dogs. And again, we have photos of that on the YouTube version of them enjoying it. And Gil, another thing, so you guys made that mix especially for dogs because you guys are pet lovers, you and Lori. But another thing I noticed when I was researching is that sprouting is really big for bird owners as well.
Very, very. It was in the late 90s that one of our customers called, I think, maybe emailed and asked if we would consider making a mix for birds. And in talking to her, I've never met a seed I don't like. So I was completely enthralled by the idea, and I did some research, and she sent me some directions as to companies to direct me to companies who sold similar products so that I could see what bird owners were used to. And we talked to our vet and to a bird-specific vet that happened to be across the street from where our vet was, and just decided on a mix that worked well. And we sent some samples to this particular customer, and she shared them with her friends. And we just came up with our mixes, and we named them. We had 3 mixes for different sized birds, but we were told by the vet that it doesn't make any difference. They can eat them all. They're all incredibly good for them. Every seed, a seed that has been soaked has gained that amazing nutrition, but it's also no longer has enzyme inhibitors. It releases those so that your body is not required to spend enzymes to digest it. And this is true of the animals that consume these too. So that's why it's better to at least soak seeds, if not actually germinate them further, for all of us, for all species involved here. So the bird people, God bless them. They are the sweetest people. I don't think we've had but one ever complain about anything to us, and they've offered advice or asked for things. We dropped peanuts from our mid and big bird mixes because several people said they're allergen there's issues with them that we'd rather not have. And we said, that's fine. I mean, we had enough people that said so, and we dropped them, and nobody ever said anything but thank you. So they've offered us advice and suggestion. Again, somebody asked, can you make one without any grains, again, for birds with allergies? So we made up Dr. Bird. And it's like I'm waiting for more suggestions from the avian community, because they're just the dearest people. And I don't know, we always have critters. I mean, we've always, I mean, I'm sitting here next to Ira, our current dog. He's an only dog. I'm sorry to say, we usually have had multiple dogs. We do have a couple cats as well. So anybody who's caring, for another species, I relate well to that and feel a kinship with those folks, and I'm really happy to be of assistance to them. The bird people, oh my God, we had this customer in Hawaii who told us her package was coming slower because the shipping method was the shipping method was slower, and her birds were just giving her heck for not having her sprouts. She was like, she ran out, so she's giving them vegetables. They're like throwing them at her. Where are my sprouts? Dogs opening boxes to get its seeds, it's just great. The birds, they know the good stuff.
So I want to go back to sort of producing sprouts or microgreens. So you're right. Like, I have found since I ordered my kit from you guys, it doesn't take me much more than 30 seconds a day. And every single morning, I can't wait to get up and look and see what they've done overnight. And I can't wait to get home and see what they've done during the day. But I'm curious. So I understand the soaking. Of course, you need the seed to imbibe. And this is the same thing that would happen if you're growing seeds outdoors for anything. But the rinsing, so you recommend rinsing twice a day, which I've been doing. And, maybe in the summer when it's warmer, I might need to do that more often. Is the rinsing primarily intended just to keep the seeds moist and to keep that germination process going? Or is there something else happening with that rinsing process?
That's a great question, Stacy. It is really largely to keep them moist and to just keep them fresh. I've read a lot of different people's things over the years, and there are definitely other ways to sprout than we do it. Putting a lot of water in just seems to freshen them and kind of oxygenate them. I like water pressure, and I go over everything so that it gets a nice, thorough drink. I learned this just by doing it. We read from several books ways to grow sprouts, and we found that the way we were growing them successfully just couldn't be done. In some cases, we were like violating rules that people had, and I'm just like, oh my God, it's nuts. I mean, there's just too much dogma, and that certainly has become even more an issue with the internet. I mean, it's harder to get a book published than to publish a website. And so people will say, you have to do this, you have to do that. Feel free to experiment here. There's no rules. I've always felt that the rinsing is just a process of giving the seeds not only water, but more oxygen.
I'm really grateful that you have done such a great job on your website of documenting the process and showing the seeds, through the process so people know, because there is a point, even though I've really only been sprouting again for about a month, where I'm like, really? These are going to be ready in 2 more days, 3 more days. And I'm kind of wondering. And then, the next morning or the next evening, I open the lid of the sprouter and I'm like, yep. Oh yeah, they were right. And so that has been really a great sort of hand holding. But I agree, it is kind of just common sense. You're just germinating seeds in water instead of, in the soil. So another thing that makes Sprout People so unique that I have absolutely loved, I got the Leafy Sprout kit from you guys to get started, just so I could try a whole bunch of different things, is your mixes. So most people, they think about sprouts, they think alfalfa sprouts. Maybe they think bean sprouts. But you and Lori have obviously put a lot of time into developing these mixes of all sorts of different types of seeds together. And we tried the Russian mix last week and absolutely loved
Great.
it. That was the thing that made me go, I actually might need more than one sprouter. So tell us about your mixes and what's your favorite mix?
That's fantastic. Russian mix was actually our first leafy sprout mix. And the brief story is that alfalfa sprouts were an enemy of mine early in my life. I grew up in the Midwest near Chicago. I came to school in San Francisco. I'd go to the cafeteria at the school I went, and I'd order a bagel, and it came not with just cream cheese, but with sprouts, alfalfa sprouts. And I was just pissed off. I'm sorry. I really was like, what are these doing here? I mean, they put them on everything. I was like, this is just unnecessary. This doesn't belong here. And so being 19 at the time, I just had attitudes about all sorts of things. And I mean, I was at the point where I would have worn a shirt that said, I hate alfalfa sprouts. So the day Lori came home with like 8 different kinds of seed and said, we're going to sprout these for the farmer's market next week, I was like, you go ahead, you do it. I hate sprouts. So the thing with me though is I love seeds. Like, I'm weird about seeds. I collect seeds from trees. I mean, any seed anywhere attracts my attention because I'm fascinated by plants and how they reproduce. So I saw the marvel that seeds could be sprouting, and I was like, okay, I can totally embrace this, but I got to do something better than alfalfa. So I looked for other seeds that I could germinate that would add flavor. And that teamed with our art school education allowed us to come up with mixes that were aesthetically pleasing as well as tasting better than plain alfalfa. I mean, I have nothing against, I do eat alfalfa sprouts occasionally. Though I almost always grow mixes or grow a clover because they shed their hulls easier. So that's largely my preference. Again, hulls not a problem. We've probably eaten half a ton of them each in our lifetimes. And so not an issue, but we got into mixing because I hated sprouts and I needed to find a way to like them. And in that process, I got to meet more seeds, which was just my heart's content. Unfortunately, that then leads to needing to find sources of more and more and more seeds, which is a very difficult reality, especially as the years pass, because seed farming is another thing completely, and there are not many people who do it. And they have to be organic or they just don't matter to us. And organic seed farming, very few people do it. So it's hard to keep everything in stock at all times. But the Russian mix was our first mix, and I called it Russian mix, being of Russian descent. We realized we're never going to get to go anywhere because this is the same as being a dairy farmer. You've got a job you do 24/7, 365. You've got to be here twice a day to do this. And there's no day off for Christmas. There's no day off, period. And so we thought, well, I chose Russian mix because of my descent, but then we came up with other mixes in short order and named them geographically purely so we could have the vicarious pleasure or hope of travel. So I just have to say, Stacey, I have been growing, I have literally myself grown over 150 tons of sprouts by hand because we did all that growing for stores for all those years. And I've supervised another 50,000 or another half a ton of whatever. It's an amazing amount of sprouts. But yet every time I grow, I too go at the sprouter and I think, my God, are you going to be ready? Really? Still, I mean, I'm growing broccoli and some crimson clover currently. And I was looking at the broccoli this morning thinking, shouldn't you be further by now? But So don't feel bad about that.
That's
For some
good.
of us, that'll never go away.
But I think that's what it's about. Is it really is just such an incredible process to watch. And as gardeners, it's a process that we participate in, but we don't usually get to witness it all firsthand. And at the end of it, we're not always eating that product. So it's just been, I think, so much fun for me, especially in winter here in Michigan. Gloomy, cold, super snowy winter. I have just really loved it, and I really encourage anyone who wants to grow some of their own food, to try it. And as Adriana said, if you happen to not like it and you have a dog or maybe a bird, your dog or bird will be happy to take any sprouts that you aren't fond of.
After listening to Gil talk about alfalfa sprouts, I need to either get a pet or give up on my alfalfa grass juice habit.
But
that's why I'm going to try your smoothie. I'm going to give the smoothie a try and try and make things a little more
appetizing,
exciting.
Yeah. We found mixing it with apple juice and carrot juice. We got a rather high end juicer at some point, and we would just juice a bunch of carrots and apples and mix wheatgrass in it, and it's on our site as Drink Me. That's the name of that particular recipe. So that one's it's not a smoothie, but that was our way to get wheatgrass into our kids. And it was easier for us too. Plus we were getting the benefits of apples and carrots.
So one last question, Gil, before we go. Yeah, as Rick was saying, you guys also have a bunch of recipes. I think for the most people who have not really sprouted, they're just like, sprouts, you put them on a salad, you put them on a sandwich. So what is, and you guys have tons of recipes, ways I've never thought of using them, but what is your favorite way to enjoy sprouts?
It's pretty seasonal, Stacy. And when we have tomatoes in the garden, it's leafy sprouts constantly. We do broccoli sprouts fairly regularly, on and off. We'll go through periods where we really just want whole broccoli, because we all love broccoli, the vegetable too. And I do have to say our broccoli sprouts the seeds we get are the best I've found anywhere. I've tested my competition stuff, and they tend to be a little spicier than I prefer. But because most brassicas are spicy, radishes are also in the same family. And but broccoli, we love grown broccoli. It's just, there's nothing like a crown broccoli or the stems. I'm actually particularly fond of the stems. But so we grow broccoli as a regular thing. And we generally just make the same recipes over and over. We focus a lot. We like our curried lentil sprout salad. That's a major. Yeah, it's lentils, which is we just love lentils. We've been bringing that to our block party for 15 years or more, and people are angry if we don't. We did bring a San Francisco spicy sprout mix, I believe is the name of that recipe, which is just San Francisco mix sprouted with some spices on it. But we also, and this time of year, we eat them a lot as soup, which is not the height of nutrition because you're cooking them. So you're killing off a fair amount of the nutrients in them, but it's great food. So we have a recipe called Perfect Soup that we use a lot. But truly, for the most part, it's just adding to salads on sandwiches. It really is the most common thing. So our website is largely big because I wanted to make sure people didn't fail, because the first time you grow, the first time you try something, success is such a much better result than failure. I failed a lot when we started as sprout people because, like I said, I didn't read books. I just used what I knew from gardening and came up with my own methods, and they worked. I found what worked, and but draining is the main thing. The soaking necessary. It's done only once. We actually altered our instructions. Our brief instructions, which we added to our website a few years ago for the people who could not stand my long-winded instructions. And anybody who's now listening to me, I'm sure, would be terrified to read my detailed instructions. But the brief instructions say soak for this much time, never soak again, because we've had too many customers over the years who they're not growing. And it turned out they were soaking them not rinsing them. They just kept soaking them, draining the water, soaking them. So you soak them, you rinse them well, but every time you're done rinsing, draining is the key.
You know, as we've said, I think sprouts are such a great way to get through winter and beyond. If you have small space, you can't grow your own vegetables, you just want to have them, you just love them. I have to say, I have truly, truly been enjoying it. I know Adriana has too. She's over there nodding. And I would encourage all of our listeners to give it a try. And I think sproutpeople.org is a great place to start, because you guys definitely answered all my questions without me ever having to reach out. And I've been so happy and just loved your mixes. And yeah, like I said, I've been doing it for maybe a month and I'm already thinking about a second sprouter. So
that's great.
A great place to start for anyone interested in sprouts or microgreens, sproutpeople.org. Thank you so much, Gil, for being on the show and for sharing all of your experience and knowledge and thoughts.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure, Rick and Stacy and Adriana. I'm so glad that you found us, and we're flattered that you wanted us on your show. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, happy sprouting, Gil. I am already a fan of sprouting, as you have heard, so I hope that makes you start thinking about getting sprouts into your life as well.
Sprout it from the rooftops.
I think we are. So thank you so much to Gil and Lori from sproutpeople.org for their time and all of that information. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. And thanks to all of you for listening. We hope you have a wonderful week ahead.